Hello. My name is Jeff Poe. I'm a civil engineer by training, but now a real estate agent. I'm no economist, but I always like to look at things from the very basics. I think what's gone wrong, probably in Malaysia and many countries throughout the world, is the money value of money. If I'm not wrong,
just a moment there.
Yeah,
can I just impose a limit about
okay.
2 minutes?
Not to worry. Okay, I'll speak very fast then. All right. What we should do, I think, is introducing the money. What is money, even in primary school curriculum? Because I think money started from we all started from barter trade. Okay, make it very short. Barter trade, subsequently probably using seashells as a common means of exchange. 2 minutes, okay, I have to speak very fast. All right. So next, money comes as a means to exchange for goods and services and so on. So I think we have to inculcate this culture on this value system or this concept of money into the minds of the very young. This eventually, I think, will get rid of many negative practices like corruption, nepotism, and cronyism even, because we have to exploit human talent. And to bring Malaysia to a higher level, I think we have to really fully exploit human talent. We are all human beings. I'm not going to touch on religion, only 2 minutes. Thank you, bye.
So I completely agree with the previous one, but I'll ask the same question in a different way. Reading the Bank Negara annual report for 2012, for the year of 2011, I noticed that the inflation in Malaysia is 14.5%. And to put 14.5% into context, it means 100 ringgit becomes 24 ringgit over 10 years, which is quite extreme. If you have a bank account, that's bad. If you are a working laborer and you get less than 40.4% increase in salary, you're in trouble. So I was just wondering, what's your thoughts on this kind of currency inflation in relation to what he just said? Because it's the same question, but just in a different way.
Would you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Ricard. I'm just a resident of Malaysia.
Okay, thank you.
That's all.
Next.
Assalamualaikum. I'm Nick Yusuf, an old man from Selangor. Well, I have one comment and one question. My comment is this: when you mentioned that the third speaker mentioned about strong opposition in Parliament, my answer is just one day. The next day it will be about 20 or 30 will fly over to the other side, because they had never experienced being in opposition. My question is, we talk about good governance, trustworthiness. These are the ones that I think the Rakyat are looking for. Being new in power at Putrajaya, hopefully, God willing. So I'm asking our fellow senior from Indonesia, what do you think that we need to prepare ourselves among the leaders about self-reform? We talk about all those reform, but what about the leaders regarding the self-reform? Are they prepared for that? Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Jamaluddin Maidin. I'm bona fide Malaysian, by the way. I agree with the first speaker about the definition of money. I think that need to be done or reformed in Malaysian economics or business studies, but money, as function right now, is basically commodity traded. Therefore, need to be neutral. A lot of can be argued on that, but basically, money need to be defined in a new curriculum. But my question is on democratic reform or democratic governance or good government. As you know, it always precedes economic development or empowerment. Democratic governance is very critical and very crucial to uplifting and empowering Malaysia to go forward. But the issue is, there are many forms or many shades of practices of democratic governance. I think, in my sense, I'm not whether it's too fast or too fast track or slow track, but I think reintroduction of the town council, local government is very crucial within the next 5 years. Now, in the American model of democracy, we have federal, state, and local governance or township. At each level, they do have a strengthening of the grassroots democracy, quote unquote grassroots. Now, what happened in Malaysia is that for the last 40 years, in the report of Atina happened for 1975, that local government, and to me I include also, we call it not only local government but also rural development centers or rural development authorities.
Board. Rural Development Board, I think it was called.
Yeah, right. Now, I think that need to be introduced. In what form, in what shape, in how to move it out without rocking the boat, I think it's a very good idea to begin with. Secondly, as far as the idea of local government, this need to be substantiated with the role importance of universities, of introducing a new dimension, a new paradigm of political science courses. It need to substantiate strengthening the very concept of local government. Thank you. Have a good one.
Well, combating inflation is very important. You recall that we removed President Sukarno back in '95 because at the time inflation rate of Indonesia was amounted to 650% per annum. Yeah. So as you said, the value of money is like it's like toilet paper. Yeah. So that's why we are very disillusioned. On corruption and nepotism is totally different matters. It's related to what Pak Anwar Ibrahim said, governance. Yeah. When I was the chairman of Badan Pemeriksa Keuangan State Audit Board in Jakarta, I sent many people to jail because of the corruption. The governor of the province, the governor of central bank, mayor, and that. Well, that's why nobody liked me, you see. I said to Wing Tai Wu, I only made the enemy. But this is very important. Yeah, this is very important. This is what I'm also quite disappointed, because many of the Islamic party in Indonesia it's not very clear what is the difference between Islamic party and the infidel party. Yeah, when it comes to money, well, so this is this problem. I hope that Malaysia will much better than our experience. I know Anwar Ibrahim. Yeah, as I said, I know this guy when we were students. Yeah, I like him. Yeah, he has leadership, and then also he has a very strong character, and then supported by Wing Tai Wu, very able economist. On well, that's about inflation, and then also about of governance. I think that's about it. Yeah.
Thank you. Prof.
Well, why don't you answer?
Okay. To rectify the information given by Rickard just now, the inflation rate as measured by CPI in Malaysia.
That's not inflation.
Well,
inflation is the M3 currency supply annual change.
Well, there are many definitions of inflation, but the
CPI is
well.
a symptom.
Okay, but the benchmark.
Let him finish, please, Mr. Rita.
Okay.
Mr. Rita, please let him finish. Thank you.
But the benchmark inflation rate in Malaysia is CPI. Although I know that.
You know that's one of the most manipulated numbers in this country.
Well,
right?
okay.
Seriously.
But we have to take the numbers given by Statistics Department and with that benchmark of inflation, CPI growth was 3.2% in 2011, and last year was 1.6. But I know that there are grouses that this measure of inflation doesn't reflect the reality on the ground.
On the question of reform by the leaders, self-reform, I would say it's less self-reform than institutioning requirements for members of the legislature to follow. Two of them specifically. One is every member of the legislature every member has to declare his or her financial status periodically, every 2 years, every term, so that at the beginning of your term, you declare what your net worth is of the entire family, and then what is your net worth at the end of it when you come up for re-election. I think in a country where there is still a lot of work to be done in clearing up the lack of transparency, one of the measures you have to put in there until all the transparency has been introduced is to have this declaration of financial position. The second one is we have to think hard about term limits for the highest positions in the country. Specifically, how many terms should a Prime Minister have? If you cannot do something in 8 years, do you think you can do it in the 12th year? If you have had 10 years to do something and you have not made a start on it, it would be the triumph of hope over experience to think that you would do it in the end of your third term. So that are the two major ones I think that should be adopted relatively quickly. Then there is another third thing which answers the question of reform and centralization. One reason why things get badly done is because the decision-making power is too concentrated in one person, a small group of people. So we do need to decentralize decision-making. Specifically, the bus system in Penang should no longer be designed in Putrajaya. For the last 30 years, every bus route in Penang, every bus stop in Penang is decided in Kuala Lumpur. And this is before Google Earth came into existence. So decentralization is good. And together with that decentralization decision making, there should be decentralization of budget allocations. Right now, the total budget of the country, 94% is used by the federal government, 6% by all the 13 states add up together. University Science Malaysia has a bigger budget than the Penang state government. So what I'm saying is to have a meaningful decentralization, it is not just elections of local governments, but they have the responsibility to do some very specific things like repair of the local drainage system, repair of local roads, and to go with it, they are able to collect certain local fees. In other words, our fiscal structure has to be reconfigured. And coming on the question of fiscal decentralization, here it comes relates partially to the question of that was raised. Money based, I treat that question as saying, how could we ensure that inflation does not get out of hand, regardless of what measure? In most countries in the world, the value of money is cut by two ways. One is inflation, in other paper money worth less. The other is currency depreciation. You are able to buy less of things abroad. All of this is a manifestation of the government engaging in the printing of money, either openly or surreptitiously. Printing money openly would be financing the federal budget, and you borrow from the central bank. Printing money surreptitiously would be the central bank extending credit to state-owned companies or private-owned companies. And the only way to prevent that is to have good control over expenditure by the state and by government-linked corporations. How does one keep good control of that? The Penang state government came to office with a budget deficit. And since 2008, it clearly does not have a special line to the Putrajaya budget. But the state government has been able to produce a budget surplus every year and start new social programs at the same time. The control on state spending can be done only if there is visible monitoring of expenditure items, the open tender system. Penang finds that it can do the same things with around 50% of what they used to spend before. And they found that with more enforcement of collection of fees, they collect a lot more money than before. That's why we are able to have topping up of income of the poorest, what we call absolute poverty. We wiped it out 3 years ago, and this year we have wiped out poverty as conventionally defined. And that is done because of the budget being transparent. And there is one thing we need to reform in this country, which is surreptitious printing of money. That is in public-private partnership. When we have got public-private partnership structure, like for example, the state gives some land to the private sector, and the private sector undertake a whole bunch of projects on the state's behalf. So no money change hands. This works if you have an honest government officials, but it is a chance for corruption in such kind of arrangements. So that is why, when as long as we have such kind of arrangements, public-private partnership, we must have public declaration of assets of all legislators periodically. And the other one is, I repeat, is open tender, which Penang has initiated and should be done. And only with then can we avoid printing of money, surreptitious or explicit, and hence protect the value of the currency. Thank you.
Thank you, Bing Tai. I think on top of that, we can perhaps add on two more things. One is actually Freedom of Information Act. That's actually something we need to deal with. You know, I think Pakatan Rakyat should actually make a clear commitment. The states of Selangor and Penang have actually done that. It should be extended to the entire country. The other thing is going back to decentralization. I think a lot of times that the argument for that one is, of course, good governance. There's another aspect why decentralization is important. It actually would allow us to be much more at ease with politics. Think of it this way. Why do we actually have these discussions on transition today? Because we have not had a different government. For Peninsula is actually 58 years, from 1955. For Sabah and Sarawak, federally, is 50 years, exactly. Now, but that wouldn't be an issue if you actually have been changing a state government all the time. Until 2008, there were no, at any time, at any point in time, you do not have more than 2 states government under opposition. And that was a very tightly controlled system. And why? One of the reasons is to make you become very risk adverse. Because you cannot afford to take chance. You will not want to take the risk to change the government, because the moment you change the federal government, you change your state government, and that's the reason to come back to the question raised earlier, why don't we actually have local government since 1965? Is that so you can actually, the moment you control your state, you control your local government. So what you have is actually a one-stop program. You get a federal government, the federal government will make sure that you pick the same party as the state government, and therefore you have the local government. And by eliminating intergovernmental conflict, it makes the state very efficient. But also it could mean that when you're the wrong directions, you're faster to the doomsday. And in fact, you look at it carefully, the current system, the over-centralization of power now in our country, doesn't actually support a three-tier government. What Professor Wu have just mentioned, that you have 94% of the public revenue in the hand of federal government, basically say you have very little for the states and the municipal government. And you don't actually need three-tier government. You can't support a three-tier government with that. So why don't we actually, our solution would have been, we follow the Thailand way. You cut the 13 states and 3 federal territories into maybe 50 states. And then you have just 2-tier government. But we can't do that. Have you thought of it why? Because the Malay rulers would not be very happy. You can merge Perlis and Kanga into one. You can cut Penang into 2. But you can't cut Perak or Selangor into a few. So basically that's out. And what you have today, why is our local government, if you ever wonder, why has it been dysfunctional? It's deliberate. Because if your local government has been perfectly functional, why do we need a state government for? At the moment, our state assemblymen and women, they spend about less than 2 weeks as their official working hours in their house, because they have too few things for them to debate about. So what do? They point their fingers at your drainage, at your potholes on the road and so on. That's the main thing they do. If your local government has been functioning, they will be functionally unemployed. You'll be wondering why you want to pay them. Now, all those things come back to why that we are so stuck here, because that power has been so concentrated, because that's one way to keep ethnic politics going on. You have a decentralizations, you're no longer going to fight all the time at the center. Your conflict would be diffused. Now that's something that perhaps Professor Anwar Nasution can come back with us sharing that part of the Indonesian experience. Right now, I would like to invite you to continue with another round of questions. Thanks. Please queue up so that we can.
My name is Tsukasaiga. I'm a political scientist from Japan. After hearing the session, I understand the similarity between the Malaysia and Japan. Actually, the Japan also, since 1955, the only one dominant party dominated until the 2009. Then, 2009, government changed to the Democratic Party of Japan. But last year, the LDP, the previous government, come back. So there are some numerous failures of the new government, DPJ's government. The one is, I would like to share these failures. Then, I would like to ask. So one failure is actually the DPJ government more focus on the distribution policies. They lack the economic growth policies. They just focus on the higher education, free higher educations, free highways. I think the Pakatang's the manifesto is actually there are many sending the many goodies, but what is economic growth policies, core of the economic growth policy after transitions? Then second question is the last speakers mentioned the collaboration with bureaucrat and the business. One of the cause of the failure of the DPJ is actually they are sort anti-business, or they couldn't collaborate with the bureaucrat, because the more than 50 years dominance, bureaucrat has a lot of the knowledge and the powers. So they had to use their knowledge and the powers, but the DPJ couldn't. That's one of the failures, one of the reasons of the failures. Then, so the third point is ongoing project. So during the previous government, LDP government, so that there are many projects. Then, so the new government came. Then the new government suddenly stopped many projects. But the result is actually chaos. So what is the standard or rule to continue the ongoing project or continue the project or not? So I would like to ask.
Thank you. Gentlemen? Yes, please.
I just would like to give my view of
please introduce yourself.
My name is Richard Kamanathan, sir. Regarding the local administration, sir, I think we will have a problem in terms of implementing it, just as the views were given here, because in 1885, the Trade Settlement Ordinance was instituted by the British here. And there were 3 sets of local governments, one of the municipalities and state settlements, then the Federated Malay States, Unfederated Malay States. We must always realize that only in 1974 that the Local Government Act was passed in Kelantan and Terengganu. So they didn't have these kind of things that we had in West Malaysia. So we've got to be very clear and careful in terms of implementing a local government election like what we had in Seremban or Kuala Lumpur or Ipoh. So that's my first concern. Number 2, I just want to target Professor Wu. Now, how do we, let's say we come to power the next few months or by June. Our first concern is to impress people, not on the short term, but at least to show people that we're very serious. Now, how do we simultaneously do a debt restructuring, I'd say, a policy implementation from public and private with the banks, at the same time, government borrowings, overseas, and also inside, at the same time, to reduce the prices of basic goods, at the same time, to control luxury items, especially pharmaceuticals, because pharmaceuticals are really very, very high for many, many people. So that's basically my question.
I'm Mary Magdalene, a retired academic. Following on the theme of the forum today, we're talking about deconstruction and reconstruction and change and reforms. I would like to get the response of the speakers to my position that when we talk about economic deconstruction and reconstruction or economic change, there's very little that we can do, because basically, economically, Malaysia is in this globalized capitalist system, and at the most, the government can only do so much, because there are so many other external factors which will come into play, and at the most, you can only tweak existing policies. And I think the change and the deconstruction and the reforms would be more effectively seen and more significant in terms of the political culture and the social spheres in Malaysia. So I would be keen to know how you would react to my position on that. Secondly, a question: what is the role of and the position of workers and employees in this economic management? I'm also hoping that there'll be a change of government. So when the new government comes in, what would there be any difference in the position, especially the power position of workers and employees? Thank you.
Considering the time constraint, I would invite the gentleman in the back, no, you yourself, to continue with this question, because I'm not sure whether we have time for the third round. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Harold Kong. I'm from Ipoh. I just want to make a couple of observations and pose question 2. I think throughout all this, people have been very unhappy, feeling that the place has been not very well managed for 55 years. And so I can see a lot of activists have a policy bent that tilts to the left, progressive politics, which I'm very much in favor of. The because we need to have solidarity amongst common people at this point in time in our country's history, more than thinking that we could, by technical innovation, make that leap. I think our greatest gains in the short term will come from solidarity of the people. But we need to understand that many of the concerns that people raise about how workers will be treated and so on, I think needs a kind of injection of reality from experts. I'm sure they know what I'm talking about. So I think, in my view, on the one hand, we need to help the people, but we need to make it clear that this country is an open economy, open to global competition. And therefore, freeing up internal markets in this country, I think, is the most important thing, engendering competition. And that requires freedom of information that Chin Huat talks about. And, you know, everything, government budgets, they need to be made transparent. A lot of us know how to read corporate balance sheets, financial statements, but we know very little about how public expenditure works. So all these things, the kind of public education required so that people are included in the process becomes very important. So I'd like to hear some views, perhaps the Indonesian experience, you know, how you get people to understand better how a country is run, balance of payments, balance of trade, tax expenditures. I mean, we don't need to be experts, and we can't be, but something basic for everybody, I think, would increase the quality of the discussion. Thanks.
I would like to ask the panel a question. Could you share your views in terms of what are the key three or five economic indicators we should be monitoring as citizens to gauge the health of the political transition?
To curve the politicization
to assess
of economy.
the health of the political transition. You know, share your views in terms of 3 to 5 key economic indicators, and if you will, also share 3 to 5 key social indicators which an average person on the street should be, you know, interested in.
Okay, well, that's quite a lot of questions to ask. But let me just sum it up very briefly. We have one set of questions basically surrounding issues of economic management that start from what's the growth strategy, from what has been reviewed by ICA. Mahathir's strategy of looking east has been basically copied by Pakatan Rakyat as well. So in giving a lot of handouts, so his question was that, what's the strategy to promote growth? And that's linked to, Madam, your questions about that, how much room we have under the constraints of globalized capitalism. Then related to that is questions of, I think there was questions about debt restructuring, and how do we deal with the ongoing project? How do we actually look at them? Those might have been introduced, you know, under cronies' influence and so on. How do we look at those things? And there's one more question that there are two more other questions. One is actually a questions about policy literacy. How do we actually get people to understand how economic management and so on? That's related to the last question being posed. What kind of KPI that can we actually bring to the mind of the public? The other question is what, Madam, you posed, is actually about industrial democracy. How do we actually expand political democracy to the industrial realm? Now, the second part of the question is basically more about social political changes. One of them is actually about little Napoleons. If our bureaucrats have been there for years, for decades, sorry, and they have not been business friendly, how are you going to re-educate them, you know, recondition them? The second question is actually related to local elections. Now, in local elections, I share the point that our friends raised just now, but also I would like to point in the process of decolonization, local government was not the third vote. It was actually the first vote. It was the first vote that was given to Georgetown in 1951, and then to Kuala Lumpur in 1952. It was the very basis that how UMNO and MCA can come together and forge a multi-ethnic coalition. So that leads only to the national election in 1955 and then the state election in 1959. So there's a bit of background. If local election is what even our colonial master would give us, why is it that our national government wants to take it away from us? It's two questions of, how it is going to be organized, whatever form and so on. But the other question is fundamentally about the legitimacy. I, for one, subscribe to the American belief, no taxation without representation. Any government without representative basis that tax are no difference from robberies. The only thing is that the robbery is done with license. Democracy is the only way to differentiate violence, from arbitrary violence and eventually what that may serve the benefits of the people. So that's about the consensus of the rules and so on. Now, I would like to invite our panelists to look into the two sets of questions. One is on economic changes that we need to introduce. The other one is about political changes. And on top of political changes, I just add back what I said earlier. Perhaps we can look a bit more into the futures of decentralization in Indonesia. How does that improve? Because at the point of 1998, let us remember there was that time that East Timor went independent. And there were questions that whether Indonesia can hold itself as in one piece in democratization. Now that's always a question that is interesting enough that looking at all the questions raised today, no one actually asked the questions that, would you have a riot? That was the first question that we prepared because we think that was why Malaysian would think. But no one has actually asked that question. It shows that how far we have moved on. But let's just not forget, at the far east of this country, we are now apparently having terrorism attack, whom the intruders at the beginning was called neither militants nor terrorists by our Home Minister. So you have that questions at hand, and people do ask and say, can you survive? Can this country, which is multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multilingual, and so on, can it survive democratization? That was a question that was being posed on Indonesia because people see the breakup of Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, and so on. So I think decentralization experience in Indonesia will give us a bit of hints on that. Perhaps, Prof, you want to begin first? Okay.
Oh, thank you. Before I answer the question on decentralization, let me pick up the issue of economic change. I said I like the speech given by Anwar Ibrahim. I think it's very clear. Direction is very clear. Where do we go? He said that we have to improve productivity to move up to industrial, to high income group. If you compare yourself with the Philippines and Myanmar, the Philippines and Myanmar in the 50s, they are the more advanced country in this region. I think we're extremely doing well. But as Wing Tai-Wu said, if you compare yourself with Taiwan, Korea, Czech Republic, you are far behind. So that's why again, I like the speech given by Anwar Ibrahim. Now your task is how to move up to the first tier, to become high income group. That you have to improve productivity. How do you do that? Well, to correct, he said, the old NEP policies, affirmative action, transfer of equity, access to government procurement, things like that. Of course, in any society, we have to, pursue rapid economic growth, and then also pay attention to equality, and also stabilization. Yeah, but the way you do it under NAP is now quite distorted. They have to adjust it. Yeah, this is what again. I like this guy. I like this guy, and that is also supported by Wing Taiwu. So this is the way I see it as a foreigner, yeah, as a Indonesian good friend of Anwar Ibrahim since long time ago. And then on the role of workers. Now I think Malaysia cannot continue to produce low value added product with the help of foreign workers from Indonesia, Sri Lanka, the Philippines, in Sabah, and other countries. Yeah, I think you have the resources to, well, to give them a minimum wage, yeah, and also to introduce social security. Yeah, you have the resources to move up to high income group. So this kind of thing, you can do that. You cannot rely forever on Indonesian worker. No, on Sri Lankan worker, it's not good for you. Yeah, so.
And they are not coming.
That's why I keep sending my colleague to study to Penang under Kier Johari. You see what is the secret of Penang to become leading industrial zone in this region? Yeah, I think that we need the lesson in the country like Indonesia, so we can create job in Indonesia. Yeah, that's the only way to reduce the migration of workers all the way from Malaysia to this country. On decentralization, there is good news and bad news. The good news, we give them authority and resources to compete with one another, to create jobs and then also to increase the productivity. Yeah? How they do that? They have to improve that school system, health care system, and then also infrastructure. Some region learn, yeah, some are not. And then now you see also the tendency of factionalism, ethnic group, yeah. The Batak, for example, people like me, want to establish new province, yeah, even though they don't have the resources, yeah. So this kind of thing, this is negative thinking, yeah. It's happening in Indonesia and in some part of the country. So this is that, and then also if you do that, this is the problem in Indonesia. As I said before, we introduce a lot of many reform. We globalize the economy. We introduce, we establish many political parties, and then also, many things, yeah. But we forget to establish, to build the institution. Yeah, that's why you see corruption everywhere. Even as I said, you see the Islamic Party, full of corruption. Yeah, it's un-Islamic to have corruption. Yeah, so this kind of thing, you have to build that institution. In Indonesian case, we haven't done that. Yeah, so this is the bad story.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Asrul, maybe you can also touch on political financing. That's one of the questions on what political changes we need to do.
Okay, before that, looking at the PR manifesto and other common policy frameworks, I would say that a PR federal government, it has quite a balanced policy approach. On the one hand, there are measures to improve the well-being of the people, measures to raise the disposable income and through a minimum household income target of 4,000 ringgit. And at the same time, there are also measures to liberalize the economy and to create a conducive environment for businesses to prosper and to make Malaysia an investment destination, despite a slant of leftist a leftist slant. But I think more or less the economic policy approach under APR government is rather balanced. Talking about the political reforms to political funding, okay. One of the ideas that I've been toying with is the fact that I would recommend that political parties shouldn't be funded by contributions from corporations and high net worth individuals, so that we can address political corruption. Instead, we should consider government allocations for political parties, and these allocations will vary according to and weighted by election results, by the number of members of respective political parties. These are among the things that that I thought could be considered to reform funding of political parties.
Thank you. We have come to the end of a long session. I want to address one question that was asked, and that's the very first question. Our guest from Japan informs us that the LDP has come back, and and he said that there was 2009 was a big change. I'd like to remind our guests that before 2009, before the DBJ, Hosokawa of over 10 years ago was not of the LDP. But that first time failed, second time failed. But what it really highlights here is that, like in all things in life, you need a little bit of luck. Now, how do we maximize the probability of a good outcome and not depend just on luck? You could say the LDP was thrown out twice because the performance was so poor, the people just got so tired, they were willing to give anybody a chance, anybody who's not LDP. But you would say part of the 2008 transformation that we saw came from sick of being used, misused, and abused by the government of the day. But what we have found is that now we have got the luck of having good leaders on the other side. In other words, the LDP, when the LDP went out twice, the other parties that came in did not have good leaders. In other words, would we be lucky to have the equivalent of a Lincoln type personality? Someone who's got enough gall, but enough of a moral compass to take us to where we want to go. I think that the opposition this time has credible people who could do that. We have somebody who was on the verge of becoming Prime Minister. The other side was willing to let him become Prime Minister. So, and then now we have got, after the experiences with Selangor and Penang, the opposition actually has a proven record of being able to govern without bringing disaster. Basically, it is like Joko Widodo of Surabaya, having proved, Joko Widodo is his full name, who proved himself being a good governor at Surabaya and made it to become the mayor of Jakarta. So I think we now have a credible team such that it is good luck in that the other side now are people who could take us where we go, as compared to someone who's likely to do more of the same. Why do I say he's likely to do more of the same? He came to Penang and he asked the question, are you ready for BN? And when the answer was no, he asked it one more time because he thought the outcome would be different. And then when the answer was again no, he asked it a third time. Here we have clearly a guy who will keep on doing more of the same, even though when it has not worked. So, thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Wu, for that interesting closing. Now, may I invite you to give a big hand to all our three panelists. Thank you. And I'll pass the time back to Trisha and Anas. Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. Chin Huat. And thank you again to all our panelists today, Professor Anwar Nasution, Mr. Azrul Azwar, and Professor Wu Wing Tai. Let's give them another round of applause. Last but not least, on behalf of the organizers of today's event, the Penang Institute, Islamic Renaissance Front, and Institute Rakyat, we would like to thank all of you for your attendance and participation for today's event. It has been a very fruitful and meaningful experience to all of us. And hopefully we will see you again next time in another event and continue to support all of our initiatives towards a new and better Malaysia. God willing. Thank you.